The first guest tonight is a huge movie star, a global superstar with hundreds of millions of fans and billions of dollars in box office. He's the star of the biggest blockbusters on the planet like Jumanji, Fast and the Furious movies, Jungle Cruise and so much more. The king of the box office, please welcome the one, the only Dwayne Johnson. During his peak, he was a king. Today we are dedicating the 2624th Walk of Fame star Thor, one of Hollywood's hottest actor, Dwayne Johnson, a lifestyle that 99% of people could only dream of. My very first contract with the WWE with Vince that I signed with him was a 5-year contract for 150. Không a year. How old are you at this time? 24,500 million followers across his social media platform. I was then the most followed American man in the world, and I am today the most followed American man in the world, 50 million every single movie. My goal was just to not be broke. I used to tell myself specifically I cannot be fucking broke. However, as time passed, as The Rock's career continued to evolve, as his paychecks became bigger and bigger, his reputation began to deteriorate. His movies began to flop. His fans began to hate on him. And in recent time, his social media platform have begun to bleed followers. How could he have possibly gotten to this point? The first time Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson experienced fame and success in his life was at the age of 25 at the WWF back in the late 90s and early. Hi, my first guest is a superstar in the WWF, the most electrifying man in sport entertainment. Please welcome The Rock, ladies and gentlemen. However, life wasn't always this glamorous. In fact, The Rock had a pretty rough childhood that almost led him down a dark path. Born in the early 70s into a struggling low-income family, The Rock experienced a pretty rocky childhood as neither of his parents had a stable job. His father, Rocky Johnson, was a professional wrestler in California way before wrestling hit the big screen to become the global billion-dollar phenomenon it is today. My old man was a groundbreaker, the first black tag team champion in WWE. Jack, pull up my dad if you can. Rocky Johnson, his mother Etta Johnson, also came from wrestling root, having been adopted into the most renowned wrestling family, the Anoa'i family, which comprised of individuals like Yokozuna, Umaga, Rikishi, and Roman Reigns. However, despite having such strong wrestling root, The Rock did not want to be a wrestler growing up because he witnessed firsthand how difficult it was to make a decent living from wrestling. It was challenging as a kid growing up, like moving every year and a half at that time in pro wrestling in the 80s and 70s. You had about a year and a half running whatever wrestling promotion you were in, and then you hit the road and you go to another state. The wrestling lifestyle was so bad that he actually never lived in a house during his formative years. We never lived in a home growing up. It was always apartment and trailer park. Frustrated with this rough upbringing, The Rock decided that he didn't want to be poor anymore and decided to attempt to do something to change his unfortunate circumstances. My goal was just to not be broke. I used to tell myself specifically, I cannot be fucking broke. However, The Rock had absolutely no idea what he wanted to pursue, and pretty soon this undirected ambition quickly turned into a life of pointless fighting and petty crime, which got him arrested multiple times before his 18th birthday. So when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, aside from my identity crisis, I was also getting in trouble a lot, multiple arrests. By the time I was 16, within no time his life was on a fast track to nowhere, until one incident changed his life forever at the age of 16, during the height of his rebellious days. The one had an awkward encounter with a high school teacher who later turned out to be the coach of his high school football team. I wanted to use the bathroom, but I didn't want to use the regular boys' bathroom because it smelled like it smoked and, you know, whole thing with boys. So I'd go into the teacher's lounge and a guy walks in and he goes, "Hey, you can't be in here very stern." I kind of paused, look over my shoulder, and I was like, "Yeah, all right," in a second, and I continued to wash my hand. I slowly dry my hand right. I kind of walk by him, brush by him, brush my shoulder by him. He looked at me, didn't say a word, but he was fuming following this bizarre incident. The Rock stated that he felt bad about his behavior and therefore approached the teacher to ask for an apology, decision that would change his life forever. Her next day, I found him and I said, "Hey, I just want to apologize to you. I'm sorry for being so rude." And I stuck my hand out and he looked at my hand and looked at me, looked at my hand again and said, "I appreciate your apology. I want you to play football for me." I said, "Okay," just like that. Wow. And I went out and I played football for Zodi week within no time. Dwayne had the structure he desperately needed in his life, and suddenly going to school became more enjoyable. I fell in love with the game of football. My grades got better and I started getting recruited from every college across the country. At the age of 18, after playing football for only 2 years, Dwayne Johnson was drafted to play college ball, having ranked among the top 10 high school defensive tackles in the country. Dwayne Johnson finally get a piece of the 7 home quarterback due to his size and natural athletic ability, had earned a spot on the team as a walk-on player, making him the only freshman on the team that year. I was at the University of Miami. I came in, I was balling out. I was gonna be the only freshman to play. However, during his senior year, he suffered a shoulder injury which got him cut from the team, ending his dream of joining the NFL. I get injured and my whole shoulder came out and I had to have a complete reconstruction done. But that sent me in a tailspin. He'd end his football career at the University of Miami on the bench, and no NFL coaches wanted to take a chance on him. Didn't get drafted, no free agent contract. Sitting on my butt now thinking, what am I gonna do? Luckily for Dwayne, the Calgary Stampeders in the Canadian Football League took a chance on him and gave him a spot on their team. I was offered a CFLO contract. It was a practice squad contract that paid me probably, I think, somewhere between $250 and $300 a week. However, this didn't last long, only 2 months after being drafted into the Calgary Stampeders practice roster, he got cut from the team. I went up there with a focus goal in mind to make it, and I just did not make the team. To say Dwayne was devastated would be a massive understatement. With only $7 in his pocket and no clear future ahead of him, he fell into a deep depression for months on end. So then I remember being in my parents' apartment at that time, and I was completely depressed every single day. Now I'm sitting at home and I got nothing to do. A lot of my friends who I play with at University of Miami are now millionaires, are playing in the NFL, and I got jack shit. It was at this point that the Rock realized his dream of becoming a football star would not come to fruition, and so he began considering a wrestling career as a backup option. And I thought, I'm gonna shift my focus onto something I think I'm gonna love. I think it's in here, passion, it bro, wrestling. However, his father did not want him to get into wrestling, which led to a heated argument between the two. He said, "What are you gonna do?" I said, "I'm gonna get in the business." "You went what business?" I said, "The wrestling business, dude. We got in the biggest fucking fight. Really, the biggest am I? Didn't want you to do it. He didn't want me to do it." Eventually, after a lot of persuasion, his father would give in and agree to train him. However, it was during this process that Dwayne would come to understand the reason behind his dad's hesitance towards him becoming a wrestler. He agreed to train me, but I realized he didn't want to see that happen because he felt like, hey, look around, like I was one of the successful ones in wrestling, but I got a little fucking apartment that I can't even afford to pay $500 a month. I don't want this for you. At the age of 24, after training for a period of only 3 months, Dwayne would officially begin his wrestling career, using his family connection to get his very first tee-out match at the WWE. How old were you when you had your first Raw wrestling match? I was 24, Corpus Christi 15. Không, people. Wow, dude, this is your first match? First match? This was clearly a very defining moment in the Dwayne Johnson career, and For the very first time since his football days, he had hope for the future. However, WWE boss Vince McMahon felt that Dwayne was not ready for WWE just quite yet, and therefore sent him to an amateur league for a few months to train a little bit more. I met with Vince. He said, "You're not ready for WWE. You're not ready for the big time. I'm gonna send you down to Tennessee, and that's where you're gonna learn how to work." After a few months of intensive training, Dwayne Johnson was eventually called up to the WWE, which is where things began to pick up in his work life on November 17. 1996, Madison Square Garden Arena in New York, The Rock Johnson make his official debut on WWE as Rocky Maivia, which was a combination of his father's and grandfather's names. Finally, when they called me up to WWE, it was November. Vince brings me in, and I go to a big pay-per-view called Survivor Series. During this debut, Rocky was hyped up as the next big thing in WWE and was pushed heavily despite his relative wrestling inexperience. Now there's gonna be the man right there. That's Blue Chipper right there. I gotta agree with you. Rocky My NBA is looking good 3 months later. Dwayne, now known by his stage name, Rocky, would go on to win WWE's Intercontinental Championship, securing a spot in WrestleMania, which is WWE's equivalent to the Super Bowl. So I wound up becoming the youngest Intercontinental Champion, beating Triple H. Oh hey, let me beat him right. Everything was doing this. Clearly things were going quite well for him. However, fans did not accept him as one of their own. Fans started to turn booing every night. Rocky suck, Rocky suck, Rocky suck. Got to a point, dude, going into my first WrestleMania Chicago. I'll never forget it. Every night they were chanting Rocky sucks, and I had to smile through it. Things got so bad for him that at one point during a wrestling match in April of 97, Rocky had over 20 không fans shouting the phrase Rocky sucks, which was so crushing to say the least. I'm defending my title WrestleMania 20. Không people start chanting Rocky suck, Rocky suck, Rocky suck. So imagine that you're a kid, 25 years old, you got the belt on you, pressure, you're in their whole arenas chanting Rocky sucks. After losing this match and suffering a knee injury, Dwayne would disappear from the public eye for a few months. However, this initial setback was not enough to stop him. In fact, it made Dwayne realize that he loved wrestling so much and wasn't about to let anyone dictate his future. You know, I've always said the respect is given when it's earned, and if they feel, for whatever the reason may be, that I haven't earned the respect yet, their respect, that's fine. I'll accept that and I will earn it, and just like that, a star was born. I get a call from Vince. He goes, "I want to try and bring you back one time. See how it worked out. I want to turn you heel, and we have a faction called the Nation of Domination." He goes, "I want to have you join them, and we'll see how it worked out." Johnson ditched the name Rocky Maivia and now referred to himself in the third person as simply The Rock. He'd officially turned heel, which is a wrestling term for a wrestler becoming a villain. And surprisingly, the fans love this character, dude. The fans felt something that night. Within a month, I became the hottest heel in WWE. Since the fan resonated with this character, The Rock regularly insulted his fellow wrestlers, interviewers, and even the audience. When he got the chance, goosebump running up and down your spine. Will goosebump your ass on out of here. His quirky comeback and witty personality earned him a large fan base, and within a matter of months, he had become a global phenomenon with a legion of die-hard fans across the world. Finally, The Rock has come back to New Haven. From 1997 to 2002, The Rock absolutely dominated WWE and became the most recognizable face during that era. And considering wrestling was at its peak viewership in the early, The Rock being the most popular wrestler in the world, man, he could easily transition into Hollywood, and he soon landed his first roles on television with cameos on That by Murray's show and Saturday Night Live. Now, although the WWF is still my first love, it turns out that I'm also pretty good and natural. actor comedy. And people also tell me I look like a sexy Rob Schneider. Soon Hollywood executive and critics alike came knocking on The Rock's door, requesting him to quit WWE and pursue acting full-time. Have you met The Rock before? This guy is gonna be a major movie star. You should get out of wrestling as soon as possible. The Rock then used this momentum to land his first feature film debut in the film The Mummy Return, which was a massive success, bringing in over 400 million at the global box office and earning The Rock a whopping 550 million, making him the highest paid debut actor in the world. At the time, I had one line in the movie, and that wasn't even English, it was Egyptian dialogue. It was Akumashante. It probably means, are you silly enough to actually say these lines? And I was at that time, the success of this film then landed him a lead role as the Scorpion King in a sequel the following year, cementing his credibility as an actor in Hollywood. The studio watched the dailies of the Mummy Return character. I was playing the Scorpion King. They loved it. They said, man, we want to make this into a franchise. We want to give him his own movie. However, despite The Rock seeming like he was on top of the world, not everyone was happy with his success, and more so his fan from the WWE when he returned to WWE in summer of 2000. I have received an overwhelmingly negative response during his match, with thousands of fans booing him during his speech. I don't understand why you want to boo The Rock. Why do you want to boo The Rock? Why this negative reception did not sit well with The Rock during this hiatus? The Rock fully immersed himself in filming his next movie, The Rundown, which got released in high. But you got two choices. Option A, you give me the ring. Option B, I make you give me the ring. I'll take B, wrong choice. However, this movie ended up performing poorly at the box office, leaving Dwayne unsure of what path to choose between acting and wrestling. His heart was still in wrestling, and he wasn't ready to leave WWE just quite yet, especially now that his career in Hollywood was on a downward trend. The Rock therefore decided to give wrestling another chance in early 2003. However, he knew he had to do things differently this time. If he wanted to succeed, Hollywood was taking The Rock away from the audience, and they didn't like that, so he wanted to put it to the fans. If you're gonna make me a heel, then I will be the biggest heel you've ever seen in your life. February 20 The Rock makes his grand return to the WWE for the first time in close to a year. However, it was apparent that things were going to be different this time around. Had leaned in heavily into his new Hollywood persona and turned heel for a second time, adopting a new name, Hollywood. Rock completing the transformation with a new look, shaved head and snobby attitude that looked down on the wrestling community. Soon they began hating on him in droves. However, The Rock was having fun with this character, and eventually his charisma won over the audience. I got a little surprised tonight. Now The Rock is gonna walk away, but don't look at the people booty too long, cause it get hot, baby. Oh my god. However, after only a few months as Hollywood Rock, his contract with WWE came to an end, and he quietly retired from the company, choosing instead to focus solely on his acting career. As his passion for acting grew increasingly larger, someone I wanted to challenge myself, and I wanted to be better, and I just didn't want to settle. And I was really fortunate to have accomplished what I accomplished in wrestling, and I love it. There's nothing like wrestling in the crowd, right? I love it. But I also wanted more. However, despite his previous success in both wrestling and acting, Hollywood did not accept him with open arms, and he struggled to find initial success as a full-time actor. His first gig after quitting WWE was a lead role in an action thriller film titled Walking Toaster. Get your tail light fixed. It's your last warning. What's wrong with my tail light? They're broken. And while landing such a big role initially sounded like a win for him, it would soon turn into a nightmare. While the movie was well received by fans, it was rated poorly by critics and struggled to break even at the box office. His 4 other films following this movie also struggled to turn a profit, leaving The Rock unsure of his future in Hollywood. When you look back on my earlier career, The film I was doing, they were good, but just not